We got more news for AI industry stock investors as OpenAI and AMD look like they're signing a deal worth tens of billions of dollars. I'm going to discuss the details of that deal between OpenAI and AMD, what it means for AMD stock investors, also what it could mean for Nvidia and other participants in the AI industry. This is huge news. You're not going to want to miss these developments. Let's jump right into it.
I want to thank the Motley Fool for sponsoring this video. Visit fool.com/parkev for the 10 best stocks to buy now.
All right, shares of AMD soared as much as 30% on the day of the announcement after the company announced a multi-billion-dollar deal with OpenAI. The move will see AMD provide upwards of 6 gigawatts of GPUs to the AI juggernaut over several generations, starting with its MI 450 chips in the second half of 2026, starting in the second half of next year. And just for a point of reference, each gigawatt of GPU is estimated to be worth $10 billion. So 6 gigawatts of GPUs could have this deal worth roughly $60 billion, even though the value of this deal weren't included in this announcement. These were the details that were provided, the number of gigawatts of GPUs and when the deal will start, and as well as OpenAI will take a stake in AMD worth as much as 160 million shares, or roughly 10% of the company. The shares will vest in tranches as AMD hits specific milestones. The tranche will vest when AMD deploys its initial 1 gigawatt of chips. So there's been several of these kinds of deals, including one a couple of weeks ago, or maybe just 1 week ago, between Nvidia and OpenAI, where Nvidia will be providing OpenAI with the technology, and then Nvidia will gain an ownership stake in OpenAI. And this reminds me of back in our history before we had money, when we used to exchange services and things. If I had an apple tree, you had an orange tree. I wanted oranges, you wanted apples. We would just exchange apples and oranges rather than trading the apples for money and you trading the oranges for money, and then you coming to me and buying my apples and me coming to you and buying your oranges with money. In these kinds of deals, these massive companies are just ignoring that middle step where they exchange their services for money first and then purchase the goods of the other company. Instead, they're just saying, hey, you've got something I want and I've got something you want. Let's exchange our services. And it's reminding me of that, even though it's not quite exactly like that. It's giving me reminders of that kind of exchange. And you can do that when you're company of this scale and when you have products that you want, when each of you want the product that the other person has. The reason why our economy way back in the day went to using monetary units instead of barter is because one of the things, and I teach this in my economics class, is the double coincidence of wants problem, where you have to have something I want and I have to have something you want in order for us to make an exchange, which makes it more difficult because a lot of times there won't be a match. But in these cases, there is a match. And so these big companies are making those arrangements and sharing services. This is very interesting, especially because these companies are so large, and especially because this is arguably the fastest growing industry at scale, and this will only facilitate the continued growth of these industries. So this partnership with OpenAI is expected to deliver tens of billions of dollars in revenue for AMD while accelerating OpenAI's infrastructure build-out, the CEO said. The agreement creates significant strategic alignment and shareholder value for both AMD and OpenAI. So this deal comes after just a few weeks ago when Nvidia announced it's investing $100 billion in OpenAI to help the startup continue its build out for its own data centers that power its AI offerings. I can only imagine how Nvidia feels about this deal. After Nvidia invests $100 billion in OpenAI, OpenAI goes to its main competitor and agrees to purchase tens of billions of dollars of GPUs from its main competitor. So I don't think Nvidia is thrilled about this, but I think Nvidia can understand the needs for this deal, which brings me to my next point. AMD doesn't have the best technology here. AMD is second best, but they've done a great job in creating that second best product, that product that is a viable option, right? Before AMD had this Instinct GPU, there was no viable second place option for these large hyperscalers to go to. And I've been talking about this for more than a year now, closer to 2 years, how there's going to be companies. And at first, I was talking about how there's going to be companies that get an opportunity here in this data center build out optimized for artificial intelligence because companies like, Microsoft, Amazon, Alphabet, Oracle, OpenAI, etc., they're not going to like being so dependent on Nvidia. That creates too much risk. That creates too much negotiating power in the hands of Nvidia, where Nvidia can go to these companies and say, this is our price and these are our terms. Take it or leave it. You have no other option. You have to take what we say, right? That's too much power in the hands of Nvidia. These companies, I know for sure they're not happy about that. And they're not comfortable having that kind of risk on one supplier. So this deal with AMD is as much a risk reduction play as much as it is a play on getting more computing power. It is it is to give them more competitive advantage, give them more negotiating power against Nvidia so that Nvidia doesn't gain so much. And so these companies can have a viable threat to tell Nvidia and say, hey, if you charge us too much or if you demand too much from us, we have this other option here that we can go to. We've already started building out our services with AMD, and we can really lean into it if you try to get too aggressive on pricing or other kinds of policies, etc. Right? And it's not just within AMD that these large hyperscalers are reducing their risk. Companies, Microsoft, Amazon, Alphabet, are building their own processing units for these data centers optimized for AI as a sort of backup, as a sort of second or third kind of option, just in case NVIDIA's pricing gets too aggressive or supply is really limited and they need something else. They've been building their own as well in-house. And so this just goes to that point, to that risk reduction point. And that's why I think today, normally you would see the competitor stock price fall significantly, but you didn't see that here today. Nvidia's share price is down maybe less than a percentage point as I'm making this video. And normally you would see the share price of a rival fall when one of its competitors gains such a big deal, such a lucrative contract, but you didn't see that because this isn't a knock against Nvidia. This is actually a point in favor of Nvidia, showing just how much negotiating power it's gained in the industry, that companies are giving deals to these secondary and other options just to kind of protect themselves against any kind of, Nvidia might have some supply disruptions, some other difficulties, and so they don't want that kind of reliance on Nvidia, which has already grown to very uncomfortable levels. Nvidia has an estimated 80 to 90% market share in this category. That's really uncomfortable for such a critical component in developing artificial intelligence technology. So this is great news for AMD. This has been part of my bull case for AMD. I've had AMD stock rated as a buy for a long time now. And, I updated this recommendation on September 23rd, reiterating this. And this has been a story I've been going over and over on for the better part of the previous 2 years, how AMD is going to get the handoff, right? I use the football analogy that, the quarterback is going to keep giving AMD the football to keep running it, to keep getting that football, to keep running it. And as long as AMD doesn't fumble, it's going to keep getting opportunities until it's a larger share of the overall market, until these large hyperscalers have lessened their dependence on NVIDIA. So as much as NVIDIA grows, That's how much AMD is going to get that tailwind behind, because they're going to want to prorate their investments in these technologies, not giving Nvidia too much of the market share, giving AMD some percentage. And kudos to AMD for creating a viable product that is good enough to get this kind of deal. So great news for AMD stock investors. And even though the share price is up by so much today, I think the added billions of dollars in revenue and profit more than offset the share price increase. So I'm reiterating my buy rating for AMD stock today. Hey everyone, I'm excited to announce that my book is finally available for sale. I've been working on it for more than a year now, so I'm really excited to finally share this with you now. It goes through my framework for evaluating stocks. Some of you often ask why I like this stock or why I like the other stock, and this framework provides you the things that I look at when I'm evaluating stocks. I've added the link in the description below.